What's up, my spicy little meatballs? Today we're sinking our teeth into the meatiest topics in dentistry. Get ready for pure, unprocessed conversations that'll leave you hungry for more. We've got the prime cuts of podcasts. Welcome back to MB2 Underground. I am Sarah Kiefer.
And I'm Jonathan Tyrock, better known as JT. Sarah, I seem to be picking up on, I don't know, maybe a meat analogy, metaphor.
You prep for these podcasts by getting your little facty facts, and I do it by coming up with quick whips about fun facts about our guests.
Okay, so let's pull that thread a little bit. Your intro thread. What is your favorite kind of steak, and from where?
I don't know that I could tell you from where, but I like a medium ribeye.
Okay.
I like them fat.
Okay. It's good. A lot of flavor with that fat. I don't disagree with that. That's good. That's good.
Thank you.
How's it going today?
Things are going pretty well. Are you feel like you're getting the groove of all of this?
I do.
Love it.
It's fun. I feel like, we're kind of settling in a little bit, and I expect our stats to be going through the roof. Yep. And they're going to be statin. Going to draw a lot of people to Spotify and podcasts and YouTube. It's gonna. I think
to do that, you gotta tell them about our guests.
Well, that's probably a good thing to do here. So, I am excited.
Okay.
As always, to bring on our next guest. Yeah, it'd be kind of weird if I was disappointed. So our next guest, or our guest today, is someone who I met when I started, not long after I started in 2019. He has been with MB2 for the better part of 7, almost 8 years now. He is our regional vice president of operations, largely over Arizona, some of Nevada, New Mexico, and maybe Waco, Texas. But today on the podcast, we have the great Logan Jack. Welcome, Logan.
Hey, Logan.
Good to be here.
Can you give a little bit of context to the meat jokes at the beginning? Because I feel like if we don't get into that quickly, it's going to be weird.
I'm assuming you're referencing my carnivore lifestyle.
Yeah, what is this? Because my dad texted me like 3 days ago saying he's doing it. And then offered me bacon and beef for dinner.
Pretty much it. I've been doing the carnivore diet since December of 2023.
Okay, so well over a year.
So, yeah, not quite a year and a half.
So what does that entail? I've heard of it, and I know you eat steak and meat. I was actually talking to a guy last night who mentioned the carnivore diet and said he was sick of eggs. So what all, and what consists
and why?
There's a few different variations of it, depending on how strict you are. The more strict version is kind of what I'm on. It's meat, eggs, butter, black coffee, water, occasional energy drink that I'm not supposed to drink, salt, pepper. That's it.
We talked about this one time, how you and I tend to both be black and white thinkers. Was that kind of what started this? You were like, if I'm doing it, I'm going all in.
It started from an episode of Joe Rogan, one of his podcasts. He was talking about it. And I was like, I'll try it, right? Like, I'll do it for a month. Excuse me. And so I started it and thought, okay, I'll do this for 30 days, and I'll do it strict, just absolutely 100%. So it was just beef, pork, chicken, fish, eggs, no cheese.
No veggies?
No sauces, no dairy, just butter and coffee.
What kind of butter? What kind of butter do you buy or use?
The grass-fed.
Grass-fed. The Kerrygold.
Kerrygold.
Love
all the way.
Kerrygold.
And so I started it for a month, and I was like, I'll see how it is. And so at the end of the first month, and I didn't do it for weight loss. It wasn't like, I'm trying to lose weight. It was just, he talked about energy levels. He talked about
and with 6 kids, I'm sure you can use all the energy you can get.
Sleep. I need some more sleep. But it was mainly just to see, if he was full of crap, if I felt anything. And I did. So at the end of the first month, it was my energy levels were through the roof. But the thing that caused me to continue it was I'm type 1 diabetic. So I've been an insulin-dependent diabetic since I was 12.
Wow.
I mean, my intake, on insulin is just a fraction of what it used to be. So I
That's amazing.
That
hardly
is cool.
take any insulin.
After a month, you could see the difference.
Oh yeah, a few weeks.
That's crazy.
No blood sugar spikes. No kind of like energy falling off in the afternoons.
Yeah.
It's real more just steady.
Have
And
you gone to the doctor and had labs drawn or
Mm-hmm.
run? Like what do those look like on the carnivore?
Since I was an adult, 18, 20 years old, I've been prescribed high cholesterol meds. My dad's always told me, like, hey, throw that shit in the trash. Don't need it. Like, it's in our genetics. We just have high cholesterol. Like,
We
you're
are who
fine.
we are.
Yeah, like we all like that. First time, so about 6 months after I started, I got my blood work done. And it was the first time they ever didn't prescribe me cholesterol meds.
No kidding.
Wow.
So yeah, so completely different than what I expected there. And you hear about that. People talk about that a lot, like, oh, it's, cholesterol's bad for you. And too much cholesterol, I'm sure, is bad for you. But where you're getting that
Yeah, I
is
think
probably from other foods just as much.
that's right. I think it's the wrong types
Yeah.
of cholesterol.
It's the balance by person too. Like what works for one person may not work for somebody
For
else.
everybody.
Is that where you got the energy to start doing the project of building your home?
No. That started
Started
way
eating meat and ready to start building
That
shit?
started way before. Let's see. When did we start the house?
Yeah, because right now you're living in a tent, a cabin.
No, he
cabin
told
of-
me it was about the size of this
room.
room. And I remember when you were, I don't remember when it was, you'll have to draw that back up, but when you had this idea, you had this land, you were going to go buy this land and you were going to build this house, and you asked your wife, hey, we could build it here and we could live here, but it's going to be the size of what, like a normal bedroom? Or like how many
Yeah.
square feet do you have right now?
So we live in a 12 by 20. Well, okay, let me back up. So originally when we bought the land, it was weekend property. And so we had this kind of tough shed that we bought. It was just 4 walls, bunk beds that were built into the wall, a TV, a couch, just a place to go out there on the weekends. Eventually we were going to build a cabin, kind of a retirement home, weekend home. After COVID, things got weird.
Yeah.
We lived in Denton.
Preach.
We saw how crazy and stupid people can be. And so we decided, like, maybe we should move sooner. Came back from Colorado one summer, and my wife was on Facebook or something. She's like, do you know what our neighbors sold our house for? Or sold their house for? And I was like, she throws this number out, and she's like, our house is bigger than that house, and we owe less than they owe on our house. And I go, yeah, but what are you going to do with it? You're going to go pay somebody else
You're right.
to buy another house. And she's like, well, let's build a house. Let's build our house. Because we've been looking at house plans and kind of designing a house since we got married. And she's like, let's just build our house out on the ranch. I'm like, cool. Like, where are you going to live? And she's like, well, we can stay in the cabin. And I'm like, well, I can stay in the cabin. I could probably live out of my truck for a while, right? And so she's like, no, she's like, I'll do this. Like, I'll commit as long as you build me the house. We build the house that we wanted. And I was like, well, I don't know how long it's going to take, right? It could be a year, it could be a couple years. It was still close enough to COVID that supply chains were still a little sketchy.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then living out in a town of 900 people,
Jeez.
finding a subcontractor or somebody that'll show up
Right.
is hard. And so it's just taken way longer than we wanted. But
So is that what drove you to start doing this yourself, or?
mainly, yeah.
Yeah.
Just, even like the guys when were framing it, they'd show up at 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. By 10, they're like, man, it's a beautiful day. They're just packing their stuff up. I'm like, where you going? I'm like, we're going fishing. You know what I mean? And then they would just pack their shit up and go home for the weekend.
Well, and it goes to show that nobody's going to care like you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they just, the whole speed out there, I call it Centerville Standard Time. And it's just slow. Like,
Building your own house is a double-edged sword. Our house, we bought a house in COVID and had a company, a buddy of mine, he and his company come and redo some of it. And we've got some cracks and things now, and I can be like, oh man, like those guys. But then I remember it was 4 years ago, so it's probably just normal settlement in the house. But for you, Logan, now it's your wife looks and sees the cracks, like, that jerk, my husband. So
Yeah.
a little double-edged sword there.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been nice. The odd part about it is it taking as long as it has. It's given us the opportunity to rethink and process every room in that house 100 times. So, like, every plug, every outlet, every light, every fixture.
Have you found yourself in like analysis paralysis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
When do you expect it to be done?
Probably April. We'll be living in it.
That's exciting.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
You had mentioned to me before we started recording one of the things that you guys, I guess, changed, or as you were looking at the plans that you ended up adding after the fact, that is relatively unique here in Texas. Tell us a little bit about the bottom of your house.
That accounted for probably 4 months additional time.
Okay.
Just in the fact of finding somebody to do it.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
So when we had designed our house, it was just a modest house, 3,600 square feet, 4 bedroom, 3 bath, nothing crazy. When we got out there and we got ready to start breaking ground, and I knew our property's on a bit of a hill. It's not a hill, more of just a slope. So I knew we were going to have to bring in some fill dirt and adjust to get things leveled out. But by the time they ran like the laser and they did the grade, from one end of the house to the other end of the house was like an 8.5 foot drop. And so it was either bring in a bunch of fill dirt and hope that they can compact it well enough that it doesn't settle and cause problems down the road, or do pier and beam or a crawl space or a basement. And so we decided that, let's just do a basement. Well, we had 3 or 4 concrete contractors that all had put bids on the job. We're all ready to start. We just had to decide which one we were going to use.
Okay.
So as soon as we decided to do a basement, all of them
Bailed.
bailed. Like they'd never done a basement before.
This isn't the North.
No. And so they were like, well, I'm sure you could do it. I don't know how. And I certainly didn't want anybody to cut their teeth on my home.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took us a while. We found a guy that had just moved to just outside of Waco from Utah. And he was a concrete contractor. And so he's like, oh, man. He's like, that's all we did. Well, in Utah, you got to get below the frost line. So just about every house has got a basement in it, like
cool.
a full basement. So it took us 3 months to find somebody that would do the basement. And so it's stuff like that just took so much time.
Keeps
so now we
adding
have
time on.
Yeah, so now we have we went from a 3,600 square foot house to a 6,400 foot house.
I can't wait to see how that looks.
So,
I mean, y'all put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it.
Yeah.
Okay. In preparation for this, I was reading a little bit about how you got introduced to MB2. So I think that's a story
Pass.
worth telling. Can you tell us just a little bit about your history in dental and how you got here?
Yeah. So been in dentistry since 2002, so 23, 24 years, something like that. First part of my career started in consulting. So from the beginning till probably 2011 was almost mainly or strictly in consulting. So on the road, 3 weeks out of the month, see my family on the weekends, chairman on this airline, diamond member of this hotel, just on the road warrior. Excuse me. So consulting is where I got most of my understanding of dentistry.
Okay.
In 2008, I started a consulting company.
Good time to start a company.
Yeah. Right. The housing market in Arizona and all that was bad.
I'm surprised you actually knew that, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm a grown up. I read books.
Okay, good.
And so in 2008, I started a consulting company with a partner of mine. It was one of my consulting clients. Did very well with him, had a practice in Houston. He said, hey, let's start our own company. So we did. I helped build that. It was consulting. We hired other consultants, so on and so forth. In 2011, he had his practice in Houston, and he said, hey, there's money to be made in multiples. Why don't you get off the road, help managing the consultants and teaching at the seminars and stuff, but come out here and be the COO, and then let's open as many dental practices as we can.
So from Phoenix to Houston.
Yeah. So back in 2011, I moved to Houston to start my career in operations. So when I went out there, we had one location. We ended up selling the company in 2017, something like that. Grew it to 13 locations. So while I was there, went from 1 to 13.
In like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of de novos, a lot of, like every aspect of operations I was having to deal with.
And all in the Houston area? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep. And so built that up. I mean, that was brutal. I mean, any mistake I could have made operationally, we did. I mean, everything from fixing sinks to hanging pictures on the walls to fighting with, vendors about prices and associates and everything.
Operations boot camp.
So it was a lot. So I went from telling people what they should do and why they should do it and trying to institute change through influence to the polar opposite of that. Like,
it's a little different when you're on the consulting side and you're like, hey, here's how you solve these things, and then turning around and saying, oh, now that's how I solve it. Like I actually have to.
Now I have to go do it.
Yeah. Right.
So that was a unique hat to wear. A lot of hours, a lot of stress, but learned a lot, just a ton. So did that, left that group in 2017. Kind of went back to consulting, was like, okay, I'm done with this. Like me and the guy who owned it just kind of started to separate and wasn't working. So I was like, okay, I'm done. Left in 2017, started doing some consulting again, just trying to figure out what I was going to do and what I wanted to do. And there was a couple Jewish brothers out on Long Island in New York that I had worked with early in my consulting career that I'd known for years. And anyway, they called me and they're like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, a little consulting, and I'm just kind of enjoying life and trying to, just recover from doing what I did in that 7-year period.
Recover from operations and
all of it. Yeah.
Weird how we got here.
Yeah.
So they had said, hey, we have these 4 pediatric offices. 2 were in Queens and 2 were out on Long Island. And they said, we're trying to sell them, but like the numbers don't all add up and we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot. And I know you understand this. Like, will you come out here and look and see what we have and see what you could do to help? So me and my wife flew out there, spent a couple days, and I mean, it's New York.
Yeah.
So practice management software had one number. Their taxes had a completely different number, their tax returns. Their bank account had a different number.
Oh my gosh.
Nothing added up. They were stuffing cash in their pockets and in which I didn't understand until I lived there.
Yep.
Right. And so I was like, okay, you're not reporting some of this stuff, which is hurting your valuation, but then you're going to pay in taxes. Like, you got to decide what you're going to do here. Like, I get it. It's how things operate out here. So they said, okay, well, we want to hire you, help us get these practices together so they can be sold. And I said, okay. And they go, I think I can do that in a year. So it was then a decision that me and my wife had to make is, do we stay in Houston and then I fly out Monday morning, work all week, and come back, or do we move
again?
How many kids do you have at this point in time?
At that point, 4.
Okay.
So 4 kids, 2 dogs, and me and Amber. And so we decided, I don't know how, but it was kind of like we needed a change. And so it was like, let's do it. So we moved to New York City. We lived in Long Island City there, just beautiful spot.
I was going to ask, between Arizona, Houston, and New York, where did you prefer to live?
Depends. I mean, Arizona's my home. Will always be my home. Houston, I'm not a big fan of. The traffic, there's nothing real pretty to look at.
Yeah.
New York was fun. I wouldn't want to live there with a family.
Yeah.
Like, if I was single, for sure, great place. Culture, food, entertainment, it's just immense.
How long were you in New York?
We lived there about 11 months.
Okay.
And so I go out there and I start just cleaning house, you know, like, okay, you can't do this, you can't do that, you got to fix this, you got to fix that. So we're out there just cleaning house. And one of the office managers of one of those locations was Barbara. I don't know if you ever met Barbara, but of all the people, and I've met tons of people in my life, it's hands down easy to say that she's the most incredible person I've ever met. Just inside out, top to bottom.
Barbara.
Like, just the best human being I have ever met in my life. Just, period. Hard stop.
How did she make that big of an impact on you?
Just how she is. Just an incredible woman. Just balanced, intelligent, you know, like she worked for these two guys, and I don't know how she did it, right? Like, if you go work for those guys and the intensity that they have and keep things together like she had. I mean, her family was amazing. Her husband's incredible. Just textbook, just great. And so when I was out there, she asked me one day, she's like, what are you going to do when you get done with selling these 4 practices for them? And I'm like, I don't know. I go, I'm not going to stay here. You know, Amber and I were trying to have kids and add a couple more to my clan.
Portfolio, yes.
Yeah. And so it was like, okay, I don't want to live in New York. I enjoyed the time that I was there, but I wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah.
And so she turns to me and she's like, well, what are you going to do? I go, well, I'll probably go back to Texas. And she goes, well, my son-in-law, Steven, is a dentist in Texas. And I'm like, cool.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
What's Dr. V's first name?
Yep.
Yeah, so it gets better. So she's like,
nonchalant.
She completely undersold it. Like, I have a son-in-law, his name's Steven, and he has a couple practices in Texas, in Dallas.
And what year was this? 2018?
2018.
I love that. He has a couple practices in Dallas.
Yeah. And it was just like so
RDP
just
backed,
a
but
few.
just a few.
insignificant. It was just like, okay, it's like sitting next to somebody on an airplane. They're like, oh, my brother-in-law's a dentist.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, like, there's lots of dentists. Okay. So her son-in-law, Steven, a couple practices, you know, got some practices in Dallas. You should go work for him. And I'm like,
Now you're starting to question Barbara. You're like,
Yeah,
okay,
I'm like,
I love you, but
yeah.
now we're just getting to that territory of, all right, yep, your son-in-law or your brother or whoever,
Yeah.
I'm sure
So,
this
like,
is great, going to be a great opportunity.
Well, like, immediately I was thinking, okay, well, like, is he got these crappy practices? Like, do I got to go out there and fix those?
'Cause that's
so
what
he
you're
can
doing
sell
here.
them, you know? And I was like, okay, yeah, Steven, Dallas, practices, dentist, I got it. I put it out of my mind, right? It was just undersold big time. Fast forward a few months, it's like May of 2018. I'm in Las Vegas at the Henry Schein DSO Summit.
Okay.
I'm walking down a hallway, just going to the bathroom or something, and I hear this presentation going on in another room. And I'm like, dang, that sounds familiar. Oh, I missed the spot, right? So I get a phone call from Steven. Hey, this is Steven. Barbara's my mother-in-law. She says you're pretty good at what you do. I want you to come work for me. I'm like, well, I'm not done.
That says a lot about what Barbara has to say about you. He's just
Yeah,
like,
I still don't know exactly what she said.
Your stamp of approval is enough.
So she said whatever she said. So Steven calls me. So, I save in my phone. Steven, Barbara's son-in-law.
I love how it's just Steven at this point.
Like, that was it. I had no clue what the hell his last name was. None. I didn't know what the business name was. I just knew her son-in-law's name was Steven, and that was it.
Okay.
So, he had called a couple times and like, hey, are you done? When do you think you're going to be done? I need some help. I need people like you. We're growing. And I'm like, okay, all these things I've heard 100 times before. So I'm walking down this hallway and I hear this voice coming out of this room. And I'm like, how do I know that person? Like, right? Never seen him. Just know the voice. I talked to him a couple times. And so I'm like, who the hell is that? So I go poke my head in. And it's Dr. V, right? And he's sitting up there on this panel, and I remember it was yesterday. He was wearing like all white. He had like white tennis shoes. I don't know if they were jeans or slacks, but he had like a white sport coat and like a white T-shirt. I mean, he looked almost angelic sitting up there. You know what I mean? It was like everybody else is in suits, and here's this guy dressed in white, and he had like a T-shirt and tennis shoes on, and I was like, no way. And I look up at the marquee, and it's like, Dr. Stephen Villanueva, or Stephen Chris Villanueva, whatever order that is, right? And of MB2 Dental. And I was like, holy shit. Like,
this is no longer Steven.
And so it clicked all at one time, and I was like, oh shit. Like, he's not just some guy in Dallas that has a practice or two. Like, this is probably somebody I should talk to.
Just 85 practices by the end of 2018, 35 partners.
Yeah. I mean, that was in May. I came on in October, and there was 113 when I came on. So he was probably close to that.
Yeah.
And so I just stuck there like a fly, just waiting for this presentation to get over. And I think he was with Puckett. But anyway, they come down, and I kind of wait for him. And then as he's coming out, I'm like, hey, Steven. And he kind of looks at me, and he's like kind of confused. And he goes, yeah? And I go, I'm Logan Jack from Long Island, like Barbara. And he's like, oh, hey. He's like, oh, I got to go. But he goes, come up to my suite. And I don't know where we were at, Caesar's Palace or something. He's like, come up to my suite in a couple hours. I want to talk to you. I was like, okay. And so a couple hours later, I went upstairs and knocked on the door of the suite, and they had a whole bunch of pizzas and crap in there. There's 50 people in there.
That's amazing.
And he's like, hey, he told me about the business. He's like, we're growing. I don't know what I need you to do, but, we need good people. And he's like, Barbara trusts you. And so that means a lot. And, when you're done, come talk to me first.
Staple of MB2's growth strategy, finding great people and finding a way to utilize their talents.
Gosh, isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
I think for as long as I've been here, not only with our partners that we've brought in, it's just finding the right partner. And then even here, like in Dallas, it's, hey, let's find somebody with skill set and figure out where they fit best, because we know we like this person. We know they're going to work hard. Let's bring them in. So
you started in October, you said 2018, and you now sit as a regional vice president of operations.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you now? Like, what is your role morphed into, and how does operations support our practices today?
It's a good question.
Thank you.
My position has changed some. It was kind of, I filled in gaps wherever they were needed. So the first 6 to 12 months I was here, I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
It was kind of like some of the people would just reference me as JC's bitch. JC would need something done, and it was like, hey, will you go out here and look at this? Or, hey, will you go help with that? Or I tinkered with CE for a little bit. It was just like
utility player.
Yeah, I just was there and kind of didn't really have a whole lot of just daily purpose.
Perhaps a jack of all trades,
I guess. Yeah.
Not bad.
And so from the beginning, it's changed a lot for me. In 2019, when Arizona opened up, we had hired a director out there. It didn't work out. And so, again, UJC's like, hey, go out there and, put your eyes on the market, see what the owners need, what we're lacking, and then...
Which is kind of cool, because that's your origin story is Arizona.
Yeah. From Arizona, grew up there. And so I was like, absolutely. So I went out there and spent some time in Arizona, came back and said, I don't think this guy's working out, And I said, hey, I'll cover it because he needs to go. But I'll cover it till we find somebody. And so I just kind of took over Arizona, apparently temporarily. And then that turned into a, hey.
Temporary 6-year gig at this point.
Yeah, it was like, hey, just take Arizona. And then kind of the rest is history. It's New Mexico, Nevada, and then some practices in Waco and one in Oklahoma. But operations has always been the same. I mean, if you're going to define operations, our job, it's probably easier to say what we don't do than what we do. Whatever gets thrown at us, we have to find some sort of a resolution. So in general, our job is to solve problems. So if my kids were asking me on career day, Dad, what do you do? I don't put out fires. I don't build buildings. I don't,
I mean, you literally do both
Well,
of those things.
yeah.
You put out fires on a daily basis and you're building a building.
Yes.
But right.
4-year-old doesn't understand that, but
Valid.
yeah. So it was like I solve problems. You know, whether that's associates that quit, office managers that are embezzling, you know, unhealthy P&Ls.
The fun stuff.
Yeah, and so it's really there's no real easy way to define what we do in operations. It's just really do what needs to be done. And so, you know, we're kind of that, almost like a bushing or a spring between the departments and the corporate office and then the office in the field. So we kind of help absorb that and try to make things smoother.
I know from a BD perspective, as we're bringing in new partners and new practices to MB2, that's one of the things that I find very comforting, knowing that you know, I don't work with you directly anymore because of where my territory lands is not in, you know, Arizona, Nevada, and Oklahoma, and New Mexico. But I know that the people behind me, if I'm the tip of the spear, you guys are crushing it. And anything I say, like, it's not based on what I hope you guys can do. It's what I've seen you all be able to do. And that goes for certainly you and your team. And I want to hear about your team. But you and your team and Carrie and Will and you know, all the folks in ops. So shout out to all the ops folks. Pretty incredible job. And really and truly something that makes us special here at MB2. And that there's no, you know, it's no small task to make an impact like you guys do. So tell us about your team. You now, with our growth and your region or your area, how many practices do you currently, are you the regional VP over?
It's about 134, I think.
And how many folks do you have with you on your team or direct reports?
I mean, it depends on how far down you go into like back office support. About 18, I think.
Okay.
What's your leadership philosophy with all of those people that are reporting up to you and making these practices successful?
It's a good question.
Thank you again.
I think that leadership is hard to define with words. I think it gets done with actions.
Well, it's a podcast, so it's kind of
has to be.
Yeah, you kind of have to define it. Although we are on YouTube. Shout out YouTube subscribers. Let's go.
Yeah, so I think how I choose to define leadership and to fill my leadership role is by example. And so, you know, if there's a problem, first one, like I need to be the first person willing to go into that problem or to deal with that unhappy vendor or that unhappy team member or whatever it is, to not kick the can down the road. Like when my team comes to me with a problem and I can tell that they're not wanting to address it or it needs to be done delicately, it's not a, you know, hey, that's not my job. It's I
was going to say, avoiding that's not my job.
Come with me and watch how we navigate through this, right? And so doing it with them, being out there kind of on the front line and not just managing from behind.
Yeah.
I believe that's the difference between leadership and management is where you stand on the battlefield.
For sure.
You're behind the troops, you know, you're managing and telling everybody what to do. Leadership comes from the front and being out there, right? You know, Braveheart with
I was just thinking
sword.
Braveheart.
Yeah,
oh
you know.
My gosh.
So
They're
it's
in
like
my brain.
being the first one out there to scream, lift up your kilt and
No, put it back down, please.
and run straight into a sword.
Yeah, why would you pull your kilt up to run into a sword? But none of my
It was
business.
in the movie.
I know, but it was very visual for me.
I think they were trying to get in their head.
Yeah.
I think it was a proverbial middle finger to the archers. But I think that's an awesome, excuse me, an awesome way of thinking about leadership. I have a question on that. And, you know, as any team members here are growing, as the support teams are growing and we have folks and teams that are being built, where do you draw the line? Where do you think or where have you seen yourself draw the line of, I'm going to show you how to do this versus you need to stumble and do this yourself and make some mistakes to figure it out?
Yeah, that's a hard one. And I believe it's based on the individual.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Some individuals they're gonna learn from example, and they're gonna see what you do and how you navigate through something, and they're gonna run with that. It may not be perfect, but they're gonna hit the mark most times.
Yeah.
Others, you're gonna have to hold them and lay it out for them. As long as they're making progress, as long as they're moving forward in whether it's an inch at a time or a mile at a time, as long as they're making the progress and doing it for the right reasons, then I think you're effective.
Yeah.
But that part's hard, especially operations at MB2. It's maybe been a little easier for me because of my consulting background.
Yeah.
And so I never had control. We didn't own those practices. They were paying us a fee every month. And so the office manager didn't work for me. And so I had to convince people to do things that they didn't want to do when there was no accountability.
To trust you and your recommendations.
And so, like, the group in Houston, they all worked for me. So it was do this or you're out of here, right? And so
Savage.
it was easier in the sense to just tell people what they needed to do. The response was entirely different because everybody worked for me. And so I could control that. So that was safe and easy. Operations at MB2 is more like consulting, right? Because the doctors maintain control of the practice, and so it's if you even that hygienist needs to go, or that doctor needs to drop that insurance, you can't just come in and say we're dropping the insurance, doctor. I know you disagree, but that's what we need to do. You have to find a way to convince them, to show them, to use other examples of other practices that have gone through that, and most importantly, to maintain the trust and respect from the owners and from our partners that, my interests are aligned with theirs.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's easier to hire somebody from Aspen or Pacific, and for them to be effective in those environments, they've got a playbook, they've got standard operating procedures.
For sure.
They have a process for everything.
If this, then that.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that there's not good people in those companies. There are. But that's a whole different ball of wax.
It's like coming with structure and learning flexibility.
Yeah, and here you have to think on your feet.
Yeah.
Because you're on one MBR call or you're dealing with one problem, and the solution and how you approach that today is not the same way that you will solve and approach tomorrow's problem, because that owner is completely different, that market is completely different, that team is completely different, and so it's challenging. But I think that the challenge, if I look back at my life, I've always taken the challenging path for whatever reason.
You're bullheaded.
Yeah, maybe a little ignorant. But
is that what that means? That's not what I meant. Whoops.
No.
So, but yeah, that it's if I'm not challenged, then I get bored, and so I'm where I need to be.
Well, that tracks with
place.
6 kids, teaching CrossFit in the mornings, building a house, eating meat a lot, all the time.
Living in a closet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think our time, we're kind of running short on time here. But I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. How many pounds of weight did you shed when MB2 recently recapped? In your face in particular.
I would think
That took me a second, too.
Sorry.
a pound and a half at least.
Pound and a half.
Yeah.
So for those
straight
that,
body hair.
for those that don't know,
I'd say kind of curly.
Go to the MB2
Nappy.
Instagram and you will find a scraggly looking Logan Jack. Maybe Pat can throw it up on YouTube.
That's
a picture.
Pepper to you.
Oh, sorry. Pepper, holla. That's the first time I've done that. But Logan had a challenge, speaking of being bullheaded, had a challenge that he wouldn't shave his beard until we recapitalized. And sure enough, both of those things happened. The
Well, and
results
even
were pretty
past
crazy.
recap, because we made you wait until MB2U, and then we put you on stage with a bunch of recently transitioned owner doctors and made them watch. And then it took longer than I think we all thought, because then it was like, we're all like, all right, cool, are we done yet? And then by the time it was over, you were just out there
was
with
100
him
people
by yourself.
when they started, and then when I got done, I think Susan was the only one left.
So having a beard as long as you did, what's the one thing? Maybe give us 2 quick things. One
No,
thing that
just
you
one thing.
missed. No, one thing that you missed, and one thing that you absolutely hated about it.
All right, let's start with what I miss. I think the thing I miss the most is being able to wash it, to shampoo it. And it makes more sense because I'm bald, right? So like,
okay.
I haven't washed my hair in my head in decades, you know? And so
That's hilarious.
when I had my beard, I would look forward to the, shampoo, lathering it up.
Funny, because I dread that. Not with my beard.
It was nice.
But...
So I miss that. I miss not having anything to shampoo like that, which is kind of a little weird. But
yes.
One of the more, it started to turn gray like decades ago. And I don't know, I think at one point it was probably, beard hair was maybe 12 to 14 inches long. And I don't know what it is. I'm assuming it has something to do with the color. But you get in my truck, and the only ones that would fall out were the gray ones.
Yeah.
And so
I can understand why you would miss why you wouldn't miss that.
I don't miss
part.
that.
Yeah.
Logan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Oh no, for real, Logan. This has been fun. It's been great having you. Man, I'm sure there are plenty of stories over the 7 years that you've been here.
Oh, yeah.
Not to mention the origin story, which I appreciate you sharing. MB2 Undergrounders, this is we've come to the end. Until next time.
See ya.
Thank you.
Peace.
Wow.